You're listening to the Reanimated Writers Podcast, where we talk to authors who write about zombies. Each episode will feature an author in the genre, and we'll talk about their path to writing about the undead and their author journey. This is episode number 14, and I'm not your host, RJ Spears. In fact, we're going to be doing something a little different. It's called a reverse interview. Kevin, why don't you take it over now?
Thank you, RJ. I am glad to have this opportunity to interview you. You've done a great season 1 with the Reanimated Writers Podcast, interviewing many of our authors and talking about writing zombie fiction and their path to getting to be an author. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to kick off season 2 to interview you and learn a little bit more about you and your writing. So let's first, of course, let's start with the fact that this podcast is part of the Reanimated Writers Fiction fan group. People can find us on Facebook as well as the companion website, reanimatedwriters.com. If you're a fan of zombie fiction, I encourage you to come check us out. So RJ, tell us about your path to writing. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
Well, if I have to be honest, as a kid, I would say no. I really was into dinosaurs when I was like 5 years old. So I wanted to be a paleontologist, and there was a city park behind my house that I was absolutely sure I was going to dig up and find a T-Rex. But really quickly after that, I transitioned in. I love stories, and I wanted to be a writer, probably 7 years old. And then I loved baseball, and I wanted to be a baseball player. But now I want to be a writer. So
do any of your stories feature dinosaurs or baseball?
Sorry, neither of those show up. I mean, they talk about baseball in my stories, but they are never a centralized, part of it, except for the main character in my one series. His primary hand-to-hand weapon in killing zombies is a baseball bat.
Gotcha. Now, is that Joel from the Books of the Dead series?
That is absolutely right. Joel from the Books of the Dead series. He starts off with a aluminum baseball bat, and he loses it and gets another one and gets another one. Baseball bats seem to be plentiful in the zombie apocalypse.
I bet. Now, does he give it a name at all, like Negan from The Walking Dead?
No, it's not Lucille. It's just his baseball bat. And initially, he had a practice, like a fungo bat or a practice bat called a thunder stick, and so he was using that because it was a little weightier, and I really want to carry that through, but there was just too many places in the series where, things went awry, and he ended up losing it and had to acquire other bats. So I could not carry that along with me.
Gotcha. So, RJ, what attracted you to writing about the undead?
I probably talked about this on the show in previous episodes, but my primary introduction to zombies, because as a kid I liked, Frankenstein the most, but was George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. I was a teenager when I saw that movie and was absolutely blown away. And a lot of people, have a different take on it, and this will be sort of strange, but I've always been attracted to the romantic notion of survival, that it's you, your skills, your wit, and your capabilities in this zombie-filled world to survive. And that's what I've always liked about it. And I always thought that Romero, he was obviously the grandfather of the zombie genre in film, and it really just changed the way I think about things. So that's what attracted me to the undead.
So are your books, and I want to talk about your series, and I believe you have 3 different series out there. You got the Books of the Dead, Forget the Zombies, and then Zombies Incorporated, plus a whole host of short stories. Are your series, are they survival focused, or do they take on different themes?
The Forget the Zombies is a pure survival story, and it is told totally in the first person from a U.S. Marshal named Grant, who is traveling across the United States with a person he's putting in witness protection, and so that's how that series sort of worked. And the Books of the Dead, which is my primary series that's in motion right now, it's about survival, but there is a context under it that that I hope would attract readers. I know some readers, I've got reviews that they didn't like it, but there's a supernatural, faith-based underpinning of that series, in which it's not just zombies that are going on in this world, that there is an ultimate evil that our characters must face off with throughout the series. So. And that one, and then the short story series that I have going is called Zombie Incorporated. That's more of a science fiction series. It is post zombie apocalypse and humans won, but the military has decided, or the government, whichever one you want to look at it, has decided that these zombies aren't a bad thing to keep around, but they do it in secret, and they're using them for covert purposes. The concept of the first story was that there was a country in the Mideast that the president there was rattling his saber, and nothing scares anybody like a zombie outbreak. So the U.S. plants some zombies in that person's country, and that pretty much ends that guy's saber rattlings.
Gotcha. Well, I'm a huge fan of supernatural elements in the zombie apocalypse, as well as what we would do as humans if we controlled the zombies. So I think those both sound kind of fascinating. Now, you mentioned that your main series right now is the Books of the Dead series. We talked a little bit about Joel being the main character in that series. So how does he start out, and kind of what's his story path in the series?
Well, he's sort of a clueless slacker type who is just meandering through life, a college dropout who's, working, a 9-to-5 job, and he's following the zombie apocalypse in the media and on YouTube, and the next thing you know, the zombie apocalypse shows up in his town. And one of the concepts I take on in the book is that, whenever you look at these movies or films or even stuff going on, natural disasters, it never happens to you. And really the context of Joel is it happens to him, and so he has to deal with it. Catalyst for his character is that he, has to leave his apartment, and he talks to his mother for the last time, and they say, meet us at the church. It has a civil defense shelter that we sort of planned for disaster. And that's what catalyzes his character into this group of zombie refugees.
And you touched on the fact that there's that supernatural element and kind of a religious type element. I see that you have a Lord of the Dead in the series. What's that all about?
Well, the tagline for that book I'm trying to remember it. Basically, in a world full of zombies, the person who controls them is king. And we have sort of a character that comes on, and I don't want to give away too much, but he learns through his electronic genius that he can control the zombies, and anything can be conditioned. Anything can be conditioned with enough stimuli. And he says they're basically animals. I mean, they're subhumans, and you can make a rat go through a maze if you use the proper stimulus. And this character, I don't give away what he particularly does, but he uses a training stimulus to train zombies to do what he wants to do. And he becomes the arch nemesis of Joel and the zombie refugees.
So now your Books of the Dead series, it's currently about 7 books long, and book 7 features a showdown between Joel and one of the main antagonists in the series, Colonel Kilgore. Will there be more books in the series after that, or is this the end of the series?
The funny thing about it is that I wrote the first book not even knowing I was going to have a series, and I had my Forget the Zombies book out, and a small press discovered me and said, hey, you got anything for us? And I just started writing Sanctuary from the Dead, the first book in the Books of the Dead series. Could you make it a series, they asked. So I did a short outline for a trilogy that it turned out to be a 6-book arc, and just absolutely blew up. And it was really only supposed to be 2 more books, and that outline that was like 4 pages long turned into 6 more books. And it really could possibly end there, but I have a new arc that I'm going to that I'm working on now, that I would like to see another 3 books out of it. And currently I'm working on a spin-off series that's tentatively called the Deadland Chronicles. And because the book, the reason they got so long and blew up is that I brought in all these supporting characters. And supporting characters, they want lives of their own. They have voices, they have thoughts, they have feelings. And so I'm taking two sets of characters from that, from the Books of the Dead, and spinning them off into the Deadland Chronicles. And Deadland Chronicles 1, Running from the Dead, is going to come out in February, and I'm actually writing book 2 now called Deadland Chronicles 2, The Undead Horde, and I'm scheduling that for release in April. So that series, I'm trying to spin off series and see what I can do with that. I just ended up liking these characters so much. They wanted to go on, and they were no longer, their plot line no longer mixed with Joel anymore, because Joel's off doing this other thing, finding a cure. And they just can't, they're separated by 100 miles of geography, and I couldn't put them together any longer. So Joel's going off on his own, and the Books of Dead will continue. The Deadland Chronicles will take on the rest of the characters and carry them along for a while.
Well, that is quite a lot going on there in that series. That's awesome. Now, RJ, I know that you're also a teacher or a professor there, and a father, busy family man. And with all these writing projects, how do you have time to write that much?
Well, it's interesting, and it really just requires, a dedication, a focus. And I'm older than most of my fellow writers in like Reanimated writers, and it came down to basically me saying, I've always wanted to do this. If you sit back on the sidelines and wait for it to happen, it won't. So I carve time out of my day. I try to write first thing in the morning. I write over my lunch hour. And lately I've been having to fit in some night writing, because my work life is so busy. My family life is so busy that I usually do writing sprints, and I'll do 20 minutes to a half hour. If I get an hour, it's like an absolute miracle. And I will get in 400 words, 400 words, 500 words, and the next thing I know, I got 1,500 words a day. If I can keep that up, I'll have a decent-sized novel done in 2 months.
That sounds like a good work ethic. So for this next question, I know you've answered this before in different interviews that you've done, talking to other authors about what writers have inspired you. So I want to take a little bit of a different twist on that. We've heard who has inspired you historically, but who maybe in recent times, books that you've read have inspired you in a new way as an author?
Well, I always talk about Stephen King, because he really spurred me on to want to be a writer more than any other author. And this is going to be really strange for writing zombie fiction, but my other favorite writer is a writer by the name of Lawrence Block, who writes mystery and particularly private investigator mysteries. And he's just an exceptional writer, and his Matthew Scudder series is just utterly fantastic, and I recommend it. Now, your issue is going to come down with Block is that he's an elder statesman in the genre, and he's really sort of semi-retired, although he just did release a Matt Scudder novella. But that is probably one of my biggest influences. But there are other people in the genre. I mean, Mark Tufo is absolutely hilarious, and he's sort of one of my spirit writer guides in the fact that he has taken this Michael Talbot character and created a universe. I mean, they've got zombie Fallout, Lycan Fallout. He's got Indian Hill, which I have not read that yet. Joe McKinney is another person who's been writing a long time, and he's traditionally published. And Rhiannon Frater was one of my early inspirations. I really owe a lot to her because I truly think that she is one of the most human writers. I mean, she writes very human, very real characters.
Nice, thank you. That was a great new insight into your influences. So, speaking of insights, what can you share about your take on the zombie genre?
Well, I like to use less of my take and what the reader's take is. And I've talked to other authors, and there's always that joke, oh, the zombie genre is dead. It's a funny joke. I think it's a a genre that has a lot of life in it, despite it being about the undead. I do think that, it's going to ebb and flow. If you're a writer in this genre, you're going to have some hills, and then you're going to have some valleys. But I think if you're out there and you want to make it this genre, you have to know the tropes and know everything like that. But the readers in this genre are absolutely dedicated. I mean, Kevin, you're one of the ringleaders of the Reanimated Writers group on Facebook, and I did a survey of the readers there, and they are really dedicated to the genre, and they're constantly looking for new fiction and new writers.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's one of the great things about the genre is those readers that love it, and they're going to devour, excuse the pun, anything that they can find that fits into the genre and hits their taste buds. So that was great to hear or read when you did your survey and kind of get the feedback from the readers about what they liked and disliked in the genre. So right on. Now, speaking of Facebook, I saw that on your author profile page, you watch a lot of movies and you do a lot of movie reviews. So what is your favorite zombie movie outside of Dawn of the Dead?
Well, Dawn of the Dead is my favorite movie. And one thing I should have said about my influences and life influences, that I went to film school and I wanted to be a filmmaker. And I have I don't want to go too far off this, is I have a twin brother who is a filmmaker, and he actually was in Hollywood and made a lot of movies out there. And so he and I co-write stuff, and we actually have a thriller out there called, if anybody's interested in a thriller, it's called Ebola Cell. And it's basically the tagline is a terrorist with a suicide belt is a terrifying thing. A terrorist with a suicide belt with Ebola is horrifying. Anyway, so when I go, let me get back to your question. I'm sorry, I'm trying to sell books. I shouldn't try to do that. Is my favorite movies outside of Dawn of the Dead? It's always my number two shifts depending on when I watch it and what mood I'm in, and it's always a fight between 28 Days Later and Shaun of the Dead. And because Shaun of the Dead is hilarious and really well done, yet it has some horrifying moments. And 28 Days Later is really just a fantastic movie. Just if I had to say, you watch a zombie movie, and because Dawn of the Dead, I mean, I hate to say it, I am devoted and I do love it, but it has become dated. Special effects have grown up a lot since 1978, and movies of today have bigger and better budgets. I mean, I would definitely recommend 28 Days Later, and then then there's Zombieland that follows in the steps of Shaun of the Dead. So those are some top movies. A low budget, low profile one that I really liked was called State of Emergency. I mean, it's like no one knows about it, but it has a really quiet quality about it, a very human quality. So if you're out there listening and you're looking for an offbeat, off the mainstream zombie movie, State of Emergency is one that I would recommend.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, because I personally, I think until the last decade, really there weren't many really great zombie movies. We had Romero's films, and then a lot of bad zombie movies. And so that was going to be one of my other questions was, in that low budget, even parody type movies, are there any bad ones that you really like?
Oh gosh, I don't even know the title of this one. It might be called Zombie Apocalypse, like 2012. It has Ving Rhames in it, and it's dreadfully bad but entertaining at the same time. And I don't quote me on that title, but I mean, usually I get 30 minutes into those and said, okay, the joke has gone on long enough, even though I'm laughing at it, not with it. It's not really funny. That one I watched to the very bitter end, and it has a colossally, fantastically bad ending, I think, in my opinion. But it was one that I made it all the way through, and surprisingly. And so, if I got to give a recommendation for a really bad zombie film, I would say that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because I watch a lot of really bad zombie movies. I don't know why. It's just what I do. I go on Amazon Prime, and they kind of feed me. You know, they have that algorithm now that recommends things. So because I've watched so many bad ones, that's pretty much all it recommends to me is more bad zombie movies.
Have you watched?
Anyway.
Have you watched? I'm sorry. The other day I started watching one. It was called Zombie Night, and I looked at the cast and I said, "That's Anthony Michael Hall of all the John Hughes movies, 16 Candles, and Daryl Hannah." So I'm sorry, we're getting inside baseball here with zombies. But have you ever seen Zombie Night?
I haven't. I'm writing that one down right now.
Okay, so
that sounds hilarious.
It's not very good. And I was watching scenes from it the other day, but it was interesting that here you got a couple of former either B plus or A minus actors in it. I mean, Anthony Michael Hall was the star of The Dead Zone. It was on USA or wherever for 7 years, and Daryl Hannah. I mean, she was an A-lister. So anyway.
Well, actually, I do have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
So we've touched on this a little bit. You talked about your thriller book that you co-wrote with your brother. If you were to write anything else outside of the zombie genre, what would it be?
Well, funny you should say that, because actually my first serious foray into writing, I've been writing off and on my entire life. And because I'm a huge Lawrence Block fan, and my very first book I wrote in the 90s, co-wrote with my brother as a way to stay in touch when phone calls were too expensive, was a PI novel. Now, that will never see the life of day. And so I wrote another one from 1999 to 2007. It took that long to finish. And that really, it's a private investigator novel set here in Columbus, Ohio. And there's a lot of heart in that book. And one day, I want to release that. So if I were to write in another genre, it would either to take that. That's the direction I would go in. But my brother came to me with the idea of the thriller, the action thriller, A Bowl of Cell, and so that one I released. I wasn't sure I was going to for a while because I really like to have another book in that series before I released it. But I decided just to move on with that and release it and see how it went. And it's getting good reviews, although the sales aren't very high. So, if I were somebody say, put your chips on the table, I'd be writing my PI novels. But I do love the zombie fiction. I'm sort of surprised that I hate saying that for the readers listening, that I've been able to write it this long. Because I thought I might run out of ideas, but really it's the characters in the book that I've fallen in love with, and they still have stories to tell.
Beautiful how they come to life like that. So one of the things that you always end your show with is a fun question. And I know for season 2, you're changing it up a bit. So I'm going to ask you this question. If you had your choice between these two superpowers, which one would you choose and why? Super strength, the ability to lift 1,000 pounds, or telekinesis, the ability to move 200 pounds with your mind?
And I might have to revise this question because everybody's going the same direction. I want to make it a little more split, but I would choose the telekinesis in a minute. And maybe we need to put restrictions on that. You can only do it twice a day for a half hour because if you had telekinesis, you can move 200 pounds and you weigh less than 200 pounds. You could just float above the zombies all day long and shoot them in the head. So anyway, I would choose the telekinesis in a minute.
That's assuming that you weigh less than 200 pounds. If you were a heavier guy or woman, that might not be so efficient.
And you know what? I set up that question, and one of my resolutions this year was to lose weight so I can lift myself when I get telekinetic powers.
That's good thinking. I like it. So, RJ, where can people find more information about you and your books? And if they're kind of intrigued by some of what you've told us today, is there a place where they can maybe get like a free sample of one of your books?
Yeah, I mean, my webpage is rj-spears.com. I used to have RJ Spears, but someone had stole it from me because I let my domain lapse. So rj-spears.com. And if you go there and you sign up, you can get a free copy of Forget the Alamo, the first book in my Forget the Zombie series. And then I spend most of my time interacting with fans and followers on Facebook. It's RJ Spears Author on Facebook. And I don't do a lot of Twitter or anything like that. I had a Google Plus page, and I just got the notice that they're taking that down. So Facebook and my author page are probably the best places to find me.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much, RJ. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to kind of turn the tables on you today. And before we close out the show, I do want to give some information to all of the listeners about some projects coming up from the Reanimated writers this year in 2019. One of our flagship projects is the Undead Worlds anthology series. We're excited to be working on Undead Worlds 3. If you're an author listening to this, submissions information can be found on our website under submissions, and they're due by May 19th. And then everyone that participated in the Undead Worlds 2 Killstarter auction, which was an exciting, fun way for you to help us fund the project and also be included in some of the stories. It's an auction where you bid on being killed off in the author's stories. So that's going to be coming back with Undead Worlds 3. So be on the lookout for that sometime in July for the auction, and then the book will be released in October. We're super excited for it. Undead Worlds has been a great way for readers to learn more about the different authors and their series and try them out in little bite-sized samples. And then another one of our big projects for this year is Apocalyptic Beginnings 2. And if you're familiar with the first edition, it's a collection of first-in-series novels by authors that are part of the Reanimated writers. They package all of the books into one massive box set, and we sell it at a bargain price, so you're able to check out just a great sampling of authors' books and their series. And then if you like them, you can go on to buy the rest of their series, but it's a great way to just get a whole bunch of books at a bargain price in the genre and check them out. So those are our two big projects. There will be other small things that we come up with along the way. And if you're not already, join our Facebook fan group to keep up with the latest information. So with that, thank you everyone that listened to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please take a moment and leave a review on whatever your source is, whether it was iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever out there in the podcast universe you listen to this show. Thank you very much, and we'll be back next time where RJ will be a host again.